But my goal was and still is to make a positive difference to 1 million people's lives. I'd got a trademark issue crop up that I lost the case. Right. Okay. I was at that point, to be fair, I was on my knees.
Your story holds huge value there. I think people will take more value in the facts that you went through that tumultuous time than if you just said, yeah, I started radio, came up with a name, it worked really well, and it's been smooth sailing ever since.
Counting listeners on one hand when you first start. This has not happened overnight. The breakthrough moments are when people are now contacting you, mega followers. We've interviewed over 300 guests from around the world, but we had to change our name. We got in trouble with one or two legal things around Inspire. We've been listening to your radio show and your archives. We wondered if you'd be interested in talking to our authors who've got inspirational books out from around the world. And I just made a list of people who got a book out, and I just rang them, and I got lots of rejections, as you do.
Hello, I'm Hayden Bloomfield, and welcome to this week's Benevolent Business with Steve Twynham, the founder of YOWAH Radio. This is a conversation, I suppose it's with a personal coach and someone that's been in self-development for years, if not decades. So I guess the conversation would go this way, but what can you expect from this conversation? You can expect a deep dive into really how we can create a personality, a persona where we will just embrace and jump at opportunities that come for us in our lives and identify those opportunities and realize. One thing I took away from this conversation with Steve is just, I put it out to him in the conversation, is that he's just got this ability to jump on opportunities. Despite being a busy person, despite having businesses to run, he will jump at opportunities, he will take risks, and he will have fun with it. Because ultimately, what's the worst that can happen? And one thing that I always remind myself of as a statistic is the chances of being you. So when you are striving for these things that seem unattainable, setting these ridiculous goals or whatever, it's just remember the odds of you existing are 1 in 400 trillion. 400 trillion. You've got a 1 in 400 trillion chance of actually existing as yourself. So therefore, if going after this unattainable goal that's a 1 in a million chance, really you've already been an odd ridiculous compared to that. So go for it.
Stephen, welcome to Benevolent Business. Thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate you taking the time.
Hayden, it's a pleasure. Looking forward to it. Looking forward to talking to you.
So YOWAH Radio, your Wellbeing and Happiness Station. Can you talk me through, because for one, I didn't even know like a station like this existed. I mean, my understanding of radio is all around what you've got as your standard like Radio 1. To know that there's a dedicated channel to wellbeing and happiness is amazing. And can you talk us through then how you started it? Because you've got a background in radio ahead of that, haven't you?
Yes, I've got a background on and off in radio over many years, and also a background in personal development. So I've worked in the area of personal development since it's probably early 20s, because I've always been fascinated why people do what they do. And then throughout my time, I've worked on sort of various radio stations. Probably started, I did start in my mid-20s, as many people start in hospital radio. So that's where I first started on hospital radio. The guy that ran the hospital radio station is a guy called John Harding, who John went on to work for various radio stations in the UK and launched Great Yorkshire Radio and other things as well. And we kept in touch. So on and off, we've worked together on various projects and things like that. But it was, as a personal development coach, I was doing lots of one-to-ones and workshops. But my goal was and still is to make a positive difference to 1 million people's lives. So I was sat here one day and I was out of radio at the time, and I thought, I could do with getting back into radio. Where do I go? And I thought, commercial radio, they don't really want to know what I'm up to really around this. That's not their forte. Religious radio stations were a bit too religious for where I wanted to be. So I just sat there, I made a cup of coffee, came back, and literally in about 15 minutes later into my inbox came an email from an American radio station. And I nearly deleted it because I thought it was spam, but I didn't. And I got involved with them. And I started doing a radio show from my kitchen table via America on a Wednesday night called Be Happy, Be Inspired. That's how it all started on the Be Happy, Be Inspired. And I started podcasting around the same time, about 12, 15 years ago. From that radio thing, it was just me doing a half hour talking about inspiration and sharing things. And it got to the point where I could do with some guests. I could do with some guests on the show. Both my wife and I were trained clinical hypnotherapists. So I got one of Anne's magazines and I just made a list of people who got a book out, and I just rang them or emailed them. and I got lots of rejections, as you do. And then about the fifth one on the list was a guy called Patrick Holford, one of the top nutritionists in the UK. He came on as a guest, and listenership just went bump, went through the roof. Got more people on. And then I was putting my stuff away one night, and I got an email from an American publishing company saying, we've been listening to your radio show and your archives. We wondered if you'd be interested in talking to our authors who've got inspirational books out from around the world. So love to. So it just went from there, Hayden, and I did that, and then a friend of mine was launching a radio station in York. He contacted me and said, would you like to get involved and present a show called Inspire on a Sunday? Free reign, you've got do what you want to do, same as what you do with the American people on a Wednesday night. So I got involved in there, and then I worked on and off for various radio stations doing drive times and all that kind of thing, breakfast shows, the normal thing. But I'd always got this thing that I wanted to bring my own radio station to the airwaves around personal development and well-being. But I'd always worked this side of the mic. I'd never worked production side of the mic. So I had no idea really how it all got together. And I was talking to some radio guys who I knew, and I just said to them, well, it can't be that hard because you lot do it, you know, so jokingly. So I learned everything, all the back of house and things like that, and learnt all that. And then launched, I initially launched as Inspire Radio, but we had to change our name. We got in trouble with one or two legal things around Inspire. So we had to change our name to YOWAH Radio. And I had this idea of bringing this radio station to the airwaves, focusing on health and well-being, focusing on personal development. And I wanted a team of presenters who had got a background in that industry, either therapists, coaches, nutritionists. And initially it was just me. Then we put this team together. I wanted to go online 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that's what we did. Since launch, we've got this great team put together, presenters around the world. Caroline's in Melbourne, Australia. Steve's in America. Vernon's in South Africa. And we pull it all together, and we've interviewed over 300 guests from around the world, all with that focus. And that's how it all started. That's how it all came together.
That's incredible. There's multiple things I wanted to go into more of what you shared of your journey. Like one key thing that I could really resonate with, you talked about finding guests and such and dealing with that rejection. And like for anyone listening that in terms of is trying to build a podcast or whatever it is, a YouTube channel, and you're trying to create content around with people where you are interacting and collaborating, there is a lot of rejection handling. I don't know how, I suppose as you've built your platform, you've just recognized that it does get easier to find guests, and then guests start coming to you, as you alluded. But yeah, that's definitely something I wanted to sort of repeat and just hone in on. And there is a lot of, like, especially when you start out, when you've got no platform, nothing, just an idea, reaching out to guests can be a bit like message 10 people, get 10 rejections, message 10 more, get 2 people to say, maybe, let me think about it. And then you chase them. So there's a lot of like handling those rejections, but it's the same with like business and a lot of other things. You talked about wanting to have an impact onto 1 million. And I like the idea you've got this almost like huge unattainable goal, or it feels unattainable to have that number 1 million. So what is it that specifically motivates you to say 1 million people? Like, and how as well are you measuring it? Or is it more a case of not having something to measure, but more just having something that's out there to reach towards, that you're always striving for, that helps you?
It's something there to reach for. It's interesting you said about measuring it, because I mean, it's going back a few years now. I sat down, it's a friend of mine. I run a few business networks as well, and he was in this network, and he's a business coach. He asked me what my goal was, and I told him to make a positive difference to 1 million people's lives. And he came back and he went, how will you know when you've done it? I went, I haven't got a clue. I haven't got a clue how I'll do it. I said, but I just know it'll happen. It'll be the ripple effect. And if you just change help one person change their life, and they just share that with another, and they share that with some more, and it just ripples out. And then it also became to me as well, Hayden, that it doesn't have to be me personally. Okay. And that's when we pull the team together. Right. So we make a difference to lots of people's lives as a radio station. So I'm just a conduit that brings people together, either through a podcast, through the radio, or whatever. And then that resonates with listeners, and it just spins off. And then they share something, and that gets shared by somebody else. To be honest, to the business coach question, I haven't got a clue how I'll measure when I get to 1 million. I've no idea. All I believe is that we put it out there, and the responses that we get. We've got 10,000 regular monthly listeners, for God's sake. You know what I mean? So, and then the podcasts reach people. So, hey, for me, it's more about, let's have some fun with it. Let's people enjoy it. And I use the phrase as well, let's make personal development fun. You know, so we've got the shows, we've got some great music, we've got personal development guests and whatever in between that. And it's not heavy. It's not like going to attend a seminar and somebody on stage for 3 hours talking to you. It's little snippets, it's little nuggets that come out. There's little things, like you just said to me there, what resonates about rejection. It's little things that come out in those interviews that people go, wow, that resonates with me. Right? No, that guy's had lots of rejection, and look where he's got to. He's not stopped because he's got no.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
As you said there, with having this I suppose immeasurable goal of 1 million, but having that in its own incentive to motivate you. And as you've talked about growing an audience and alluded to having these little breakthroughs on the subject. So obviously handling rejection is a massive thing, and growing an audience is another challenge in itself. So have you had any other breakthroughs in terms of, as you said, 10,000 regular monthly lists? Have you had any other specific like breakthrough moments where you've gone, this has really helped us gain a lot of momentum and gain a much greater audience?
I mean, the 10,000 I'm talking about is that's from a YOWAH perspective since launch, which is just 2.5, 3 years. So,
okay.
So that's just, it's over that time. But, the breakthrough moments are when people who are now contacting you, right, who've got mega followers, and a big audience, and that's where the big breakthroughs come. Like you say, initially you're putting things out there. Would you like to be a guest on the podcast? Would you like to do this? Would you like to get that? Now, every day I've got people emailing me through various things. How do I get involved in a podcast? How do I become a contributor to the radio station? And now it's taken time. It's from a YOWAH Radio perspective. It's like we're into our 4th year coming up. This has not happened overnight. When we first started, you not being funny, you're counting listeners on one hand when you first start.
Yeah.
And people get demoralized, and they think it's not going to work because for me, the reason why you're doing something, that meaning and purpose has to be strong enough. And if it's not strong enough, you'll pack in. And if you're doing it from an ego perspective, you'll pack in. It's not about me. It's not about us as a team. It's about how we serve people. And if I've got a presenter that wants to join us, and I talk to them, and I feel it's all about their ego, it's all about me, I don't want them. I want them to serve. I want them to add value to what we do and to the listener, if that makes sense.
No, it makes complete sense. And I completely would agree with you there. And the same thing that having a guest on my podcast has got to be the same thing there, with the right personality. And in terms of personality, you've spoken about obviously a Wellbeing and Happiness Station and your motivations there to have this impact. So with your early 20s, been a lot of work around personal development. So where has this motivation all stemmed from? What is it that has inspired you to go on that route rather than a different route or different career?
I think from an early age is reading some books and things like that, and then getting fascinated. I'm always fascinated why people do the things that they do or don't do the things that they say, right? And don't get me wrong, I'm not perfect in this area. There's things that I want to do and then don't get on with it. But that's always fascinated me. And I've always been passionate about helping people develop and grow. I used to run in my past, I've run a food business. And I give you this little quick story. I got a phone call from a recruitment company saying that they'd got this young lad. He was 18. Could I see him? And I went, I've got no vacancies. And then, Steve, would you see him? Because we think he's pretty good, we know. So I said, right, okay. So I saw him. To be fair, he was raw around the edges, but he had drive, and he had a vision of what he wanted to do. And I took him on. And I rang our group directors at the time, and they said, what have you done? Oh, and I've just took this lad on. But you've got no jobs. You've got no vacancies. And I know, but I've created one for him. And they went, all right, okay. And I took that lad on. 4 years later, when I moved on, he took my job. To see him go from that raw 18-year-old, but he had the passion, he had the desire, he wanted to develop, and to help him along that route was awesome. And that's what's always given me my reason, really. And when I talk about the presenters, there's, like I said earlier, there's only me and Steve in America who've presented on the radio before. Everybody else we've trained up, we've developed, they've grown. And as in a radio station, if that's what we're all about, personal development and growth, doesn't it make sense to give people opportunity?
And I think that's a huge part of business, and something, well, in my own studies and just in business in general and employing people, is something that I kind of learned later after I started employing people. As you said there, if you see someone, you meet someone where there is potential and you think that they could do something incredible, or if they just need a bit of guidance, is just take them on, and that you'll find the work for them. Finding the people is the hardest thing, but if you can find the right people, just take them on, you will find work for them, and you'll find a way for them to be beneficial and be efficient and be financially a thumbs up for the company. And that's, but I think it's rare that people take that, I suppose, risk. It feels wrong to say risk, because the risk is letting that potential go and just saying, sorry, we're no vacancies at the moment, we're full. But I think the risk is, not taking them on. And there's little risk if you've got the right person, take them on, because the work will come. And that's something that I found.
Going with that, Hayden, when I saw that lad that day, one of the things that went in my head was, I'd rather have this lad working for me than against me.
Yeah.
Because somebody is going to see this potential. Somebody will see it. I've seen it. Somebody else will see it. And I'd rather have him sat around my table than somebody else's table.
Yeah, exactly. One thing, just in the 15 minutes we've already been talking, one thing that I'm starting to see as a common theme within your story and your journey is just recognizing opportunities and being able to say yes to moments when they don't specifically look like they could be good. So like you mentioned there about a recruitment agent just saying, here's someone, can you give them a go? And most people in business are very busy, calendar's full. It's just like, no, I've not got the time. You wouldn't even bother responding to the email or the call, whatever it is, you just ignore it. Whereas, and you've taken the time to actually go, okay, do you know what? It's going to cost me a bit of time, but I'll give it a go. I'll meet the guy, see what it's like. And you've mentioned this like in the journey of finding guests, and like with the radio, having this email come through from America. How many, you said you wondered if it was spam, but you thought, do you know what? I'll give it a little read and actually get a bit of information here. And how many people would just go, right, straight in the bin, get rid of that? Whereas I think a key thing that I'm realizing from you is you're talking about is seeing these moments and these little opportunities and maybe just giving them a bit more attention to see if they could potentially be a huge opportunity. And it seems like with you, this has become quite a skill that by doing that, you've created some huge opportunities for yourself.
I think it's about, for me, I use it quite a lot. It's about exploring. It's about exploring opportunities. I mean, we'll have a team call from a YOWAH Radio perspective, and we'll have the team on. And I often say, just throw some ideas at me. Let's explore. Let's kick it around. We don't say no to anything at this point. Let's go. And we had one of the team came up with an idea. Said we'd Steve, we'd like to do a program called Men and Menopause, because there's lots of stuff there for the woman, but what about the man involved in how does that affect his life and all that kind of thing, and his relationship with his partner and all that kind of thing. So I went, okay, so let's explore it. So we did it, and we put this program together. We then put a program together called The Silence, which is all about survivors of child sex abuse. Okay, let's kick it around. Let's talk. Let's put it out there. If it works, it works. If it doesn't work, we can always tweak it. We can come back and revisit it and think, well, that didn't work. Let's tweak it that way. So, I love to explore opportunities. I love to think about the ways we could do it. Even now, I will sit here as the radio station, and I'll be working behind the scenes going, what happens if I tweak that? What happens if I hit that button there? What's the worst thing that can happen? I'll probably take us off the air, but hey, if I don't hit that button, I'll never know what it does. And I have a phrase as well. It's called, I use this phrase quite a lot, is celebrate imperfection.
I like that.
Yeah. Don't wait for everything to be perfect, because you will never, ever, ever start. Okay. I was a guest on a friend of mine's podcast called Michael Heppel, who's one of the top inspirational guys across Europe, probably in the world now. And he asked me to, he said, Steve, I'm going to ask you what inspires you. And as he said that, I reached out to my right and I brought up a carrot, a wonky carrot. And he went, what the heck's that? And I went, this carrot has as much nutritional value and is as tasty as a carrot that is grown to a spec for a supermarket. But many won't touch it because it looks odd. So my message is just celebrate imperfection and make a start.
No, I like that. And to go into some of your like philosophies there, Steve, is a key. I'm trying to think how I want to frame the question, because there's a huge piece of value to take here, but you're talking here about having a station, having all of these listeners, and still being very playful, very almost like toddler-like and curious in the way that you can say, look, I can push this button, it could all go wrong. I guess there's a lot of responsibility there. You've got a team, I suppose it's about being in a creative setting though, and as a team you come together and say, look, let's take some risks. I don't want to hear, like, if you've got an idea, share it. I don't need to hold back. So how is it you have been able to build a team with that philosophy? Because I think, especially like in a sort of more corporate setting, that's something that's just eradicated. So what is it, or what keys can you sort of help if someone is trying to build a team? So like in my business, I've had that in the past with like team members, and sort of wanting to get creative ideas from people, but then also wanting to kind of keep things ticking by, keep things profitable without making too many mistakes. So how have you found the balance, or what advice would you take from there to people to help keep that curiosity, keep the creativity, keep the risk taking without it being too detrimental?
I think not to be afraid to take that risk, and just think, what's the worst thing can happen? We can go off air. What's the worst thing that can happen if we change something? We may just mess a show up for a day. You know what I mean? Or is it, whatever we do, it's not life and death, Aidan. We're not killing anybody, and the way we learn is by taking those risks, and if I give you an example, I was live one afternoon, and people often say to me, how do you know what you're going to say, Steve, when you're on the radio? And I go, I haven't got a clue. I said, I do not know what is going to come out my mouth until the record's finished. And it was one afternoon, it was a bank holiday type like we've just had for Easter. And I just went, it's Fail Radio, it's 20 minutes past 4 o'clock on a wonderful Tuesday afternoon, and played the song. Email went, text went, don't know where you are, Steve, it's Wednesday. Right. So I completely got the day wrong. Right. And I've been in the studio, I've hit a button and deleted all the music off the playlist. Right. So, but it's not like, you go, well, how do I recover it then? Because if I've never done it, I would have never known how to recover it. Do you know what I mean? So, and I say to our presenters, because, they may be voice tracking their show from somewhere and things like that. And I go, don't sit there worried about having to make it, repeat your voice track to make it perfect. What comes out, comes out. Be authentic. That's the message, really, Aidan. People buy and people can see whether you're authentic. If you're false, people won't follow you. If you're authentic, people will follow you.
Completely agree with you, Stephen. I think one thing you mentioned there as well is just having that humility and being able to make mistakes. And I think just being able to embrace your mistakes is a huge thing. I'm thinking about like some of my favorite podcasts and like listen to the radio, and if I pick out favorite moments or just on TV, whatever it is, sometimes it's the fact that people can make those mistakes. Like you said about going there about, oh, lovely Tuesday morning to everyone, hope you're all good, and then suddenly everyone's like, what are you doing? It's Wednesday. But like as a presenter, you could take like huge embarrassment there and just be like, oh my God, how do I overcome this mistake? Or just be like, I don't know, I was on about, guys, clearly I've got my days mixed up. What day are we even on? And I think a lot of people there can relate to it. It resonates with people because we all make those mistakes like every day. How often do you walk in to the workplace and just be like, oh, it's Friday today? And they're like, no, it's Monday. And you're like, oh, yeah, damn it. And so I think we can all relate to that, and it becomes so much more
valuable to us, and it makes more enjoyment. And especially on the subject of like well-being and happiness, it's just those little moments where you can really connect with a channel or whatever content it is you're consuming there.
There's a great thing. I forget who it was, but it was some American millionaire called one of his staff in one day, and because this member of staff had made a big cock up with a decimal point in the wrong place, and he'd cost the company thousands of pounds, and he thought he was going to get the sack, right? And the CEO said, "Why would I sack you? You've just cost me £1,000 to train you not to do that again." Do you know what I mean? So you basically just don't do it again, but you've learned, and it's, sometimes, it sounds easy to say, but even I used to train salespeople, and you'd be out in the field with the salespeople, and you'd let them, as long as they weren't going to cost your company millions of pounds, let them make a mistake in the presentation, because they will learn from that. If you're just trying to put it right for them all the time, they never learn. So, one of the messages that I say to the team, just go with it. Just what comes out your mouth comes out your mouth. And if you feel you've made a mistake and you've cocked up around it later, then you won't do it again. And as long as you're not libelous and breaking any rules, broadcasting rules, hey, we're okay. Just chill.
No, that's perfect. I like that story there, and it's a huge point, as you said. The key thing is if you can make the mistake and sort of realize what it is, and it's a huge part of personal development is being able to, for one, put yourself in an environment to make mistakes, and two, when you do make them, is actually analyze them and be like, okay, that's where I've gone wrong. This is what I need to fix. Because you'll make, if you're in sales, whatever you're in, finance, operations, you'll become the best person, or the person that's most likely to be able to lead in that example, because you've been able to make all the mistakes. And it's the amount of business owners I'd sit down and talk to, and it will be a case of, one thing I was having a conversation with over the weekend actually was when it comes to like building wealth financially, is you speak to some of the most successful people in the world, and they'll be the people that have lost the most amount of money, because they've made so many mistakes and they've therefore learned from those mistakes. Here's how you can build a very successful company, motivate a huge team, and generate huge amounts of wealth for yourself, because they've managed to make the biggest mistakes but learn from them.
Very, very much so. I mean, when I said earlier, from when we were doing Inspire, and I'd got a trademark issue crop up that I lost the case. Right. Okay. I was at that point, to be fair, I was on my knees. Yeah. It was like, right. Okay. I didn't expect to lose that, but hey, we're still here. We need to rebrand. So that's when we changed our name to YOWAH Radio, and that came about from a YOWAH Radio name came about when I was struggling for a name, to be honest, because every name I put out there, somebody had got it, around inspiration. And then I remembered my wife and I, we'd been out to Australia about 6 years ago, and we'd been to this place called YOWAH. There's only a population of about 8 to 9 people.
Wow.
But they produce some of the world's finest opals. And they have to crack the YOWAH nugget to find the opal in the nugget. But not every nugget has an opal in. So what came to me was, wow, we're about personal development. We're about helping people find the beauty within. This is it. This is the name. Okay. And then when we're on the team call, one of the team guys, it was maybe one of the girls actually said, Steve, you do realize YOWAH, your Wellbeing and Happiness Station. So that's how it all came together. But I had to go through that adversity of being on the floor for that moment when we'd lost the Inspire name. And I could have done one or two things, Hayden. Then I could have actually turned around and gone, nah, I've had enough. No, there's got to be a way forward from this. There's got to be a way forward. Okay. And then it did help when I'm on the team call and I'm surrounded by people who are like-minded as well, who are asking me supportive questions and all that kind of thing. So that helped as well. But it would have been easy just to close everything up. It's been a great 18 months, guys, girls, but we've lost everything. And then I had to rebrand everything.
Really hope you're enjoying the conversation so far. I'm going to give you a little teaser for next week's episode, of course, as the sponsor. I haven't gone through any of the clippets and snippets yet to give you those teasers. I'm going to call it just the fact that I don't actually enjoy editing that much. So complete honesty, I'm not ahead of myself. I don't enjoy editing. So I do procrastinate on it and leave it to the last minute. I will be honest there. guilty. But next week's conversation is with James Hewitson-Brown, the owner of Wildflower Turf. This conversation came from when I did a wildflower training course for my business. I learned so much. It was such an engaging day and I had the opportunity to meet the owner of the company and invited him on my podcast. And it took us, mainly on my behalf, because this is going way back when I had the podcast and was working with Dave, who was producing it. But this, I've finally got into the diary now, being like a year or whatever later. Finally got to sit down and ask loads of questions that I had for James and go through loads of interesting information there around, especially if you're someone that cares about the environment, this is a conversation to listen to. If you're someone that cares about trying to take action to help the planet and make a better future for our environment, then listen to this conversation. It's going to be great. So that's next week. But otherwise, let's get back to this week's conversation with Steve Twynham.
That makes for an incredible story, though. And like being able to be here a few years later, having gone through it all and overcome it and then built from that, do you feel it's more rewarding? Because just like something I tell myself now is if I have some of the toughest days and the biggest problems, whatever it is, no matter how stressful, annoying and frustrating they are, is I just think in years to come, hopefully I'll be in a position where I've built a success for myself or achieved the things I want to achieve in life. And I'll have someone come up to me that's years younger, that's at the start of their journey, start of their career. And I'll be like, oh, I'm trying to achieve this. Or they'll sort of look at me and be like, well, you've got it all. Or whatever it is. In their eyes, they'll look up and go, well, you've got it all. And I'll be like, well, do you know what though? The mistake you're facing, the challenges you're facing, like you've just lost a grand there. Don't worry. When I had a situation, I lost 20 grand and it was a huge problem. I thought it was life ending, but it's now become a huge learning curve. And then now I get to stand here, talk to you. And this story of what felt like the end of the world at the time is now something hugely inspirational for me to be able to say, look, I've overcome it, but also to share with others and say, look, we can all overcome these things. Your story holds huge value there. I think people will take more value in the fact that you went through that tumultuous time than if you just said, yeah, I started radio, came up with a name, it works really well, and it's been smooth sailing ever since. It just doesn't feel as real, and you can't really connect with it as much.
Oh, you know, and life in China, even before I did all this, you know, and worked in personal development stuff, you know, I at one point in my life, I was working for a company that I hated working for, and I was pushing myself beyond belief for the wrong reason, really, because I was trying to be liked by somebody, but I wasn't being authentic. And I was shattered. And there's one day I just had to cancel all my appointments. And I walked out the office and I got in the back of my car on a cold winter's day, put a coat over me, and I slept from 9:15 till 5:00. I was absolutely shattered. And it was one of those points in my life when I'm this has got to stop. This has got to change. This is not where you want to be. You're trying to please somebody else all the time. Mm-hmm. And by pleasing them, you're actually ruining yourself. You're not being authentic. Not only are you ruining yourself, you're actually on the brink of killing yourself. You know, I don't mean committing suicide, but I was exhausted.
That burnout.
You know, I was on burnout. You know, so you know, from what you said, you know, I've gone through all that. You know, for people to think that, hey, like you were saying, he's got this radio station, everything in the garden is rosy and it's wonderful. Hasn't life been? No, life's not been perfect. It never is. Has life thrown challenges up? Yes. Will it throw challenges up? Yes, it will. They'll still come. You know, I can either view them as, well, I tell you what, we'll find a way. Okay. You know, coming back to what you said to me earlier about that curiosity, you know, be curious, you know, yeah, how can we find a way? And a way that doesn't harm anybody. You know, it's not about harming people. It's working with people again, to create this bigger picture for people, to make a difference, not thinking about, well, I could do that, but I tell you what, that means that they'll suffer. No, that's not what I'm about. It's not about that. It's got to be bigger than that. And it's creating value. And the reason, for me, the reason why I do what I do is it's bigger than, well, I don't know where it can end up, to be honest. You know, and when I set off, it was I never set off with a monetary value in mind. And I still don't. You know, and you know, when I do talks to people as well about that, and you know, say, look, the reason why we do is, well, I've said earlier, why, to make a positive difference. A consequence of doing that is a consequence that we generate an income, right? But I don't sit here and think, oh, right, if I don't get X amount for this, I'm not even going out or doing this. And when I used to do talks, I've done talks to big audiences. I've done talks when 2 people have turned up, but I've still delivered the talk because we've not sat out the door going, oh, we've got X amount of people in the room and they've all paid X. What a great night. No, those 2 people who've turned up deserve the same attention that you would give to an audience of 100, 150, 200, and you deliver it.
And I bet in that example, of having a talk where there's only 2 people, a lot of comedians have alluded to this, of those shows or those events where from a comedian's perspective, when you like really bomb on stage and it goes wrong, or if you're giving a talk and suddenly there's only 2 people in the audience, I feel like maybe you'll agree, or you can explain on this, is that you will learn far more from that than you would if you showed up, there's a huge audience, it all goes well. The fact that you show up, it does a lot, I think, to keep you humble, and to also, it gives you then the opportunity to work more closely with people one-on-one, 2-on-1 there, and there's a lot more when it goes wrong to learn from it and doesn't go the way you plan.
It was fantastic. It was a great 2-on-1 evening that night. We shared some lots of things around that, and I think that that's important. And you're right. One of the things that people say sometimes as well, they go, when I'm talking to people who want to do a talk or something like that, they go, what happens if somebody in the audience knows more about the subject than me? And I go, thank them. What? Well, if they say something and it helps you and you've learned something, thank them for the comment. Don't argue with them. Don't get into battle with them. Just say, really, that I didn't realize that. Thank you for sharing that with me tonight. Then add it to your portfolio because they've just shared you a gem.
Yeah, exactly. Be able to, from bad experiences, I like where your philosophies come from. And like from a bad experience, take the lessons that you can take from there to be able to elevate yourself. And then from those that are levels above you and have wisdom above you, even if you're in the position of the all-knowing at the time and the one on stage, is still accept that extra knowledge and just be grateful that you've managed to receive it, because we've always got more to learn. We can always improve. And like touching on again this journey, and like even with your own journey, and this is something I've found really remarkable and wonderful in having a podcast and be able to invite guests on and have these conversations, to be able to see like of people, especially now I'm going in a position where I can start to get to more people that inspire me and motivate me. They may be reachable where I can sit down face to face, or they may be further afield and like over Zoom in this case, but it's been able to get the details of people's journeys and people's stories. And a guest I've had on recently, the show's coming out in the next couple of weeks, was Morgan. She runs a podcast called 2 Hot Takes, and just that was an example of something where a podcast I listened to just went viral and blew up, and has got, I don't even know how many listeners, hundreds of thousands a month. And from the outside, listening to this podcast, it sounds all jolly and smiley and just kind of things happened, got lucky and all went well. But then when I actually had that conversation one-on-one and got into the details of it, I realized how many struggles and how many different even like altercations there were amongst friends and stuff, trying to build up this platform and get it to the point where it is such a success it is today. And it felt reassuring, it felt humbling, it just made me respect, I suppose, her as a host, as a creator, and respect the podcast even more so, and feel more value for the podcast. And it's no longer just something that I go on my phone, click listen, and I listen to it. It's now, I know the story, I know the journey, and I can resonate and connect with it that much more because I know of all the details in the journey and the struggles that it took to actually make it what it is.
Yeah, no, I get that. I get that. And I think, one thing for me, I don't know about you, but I get frustrated with some of the big rah things. Well, like change your life in 7 days and all that kind of thing. Well, I tell you what, life's not like that. It's the little steps that make the difference. The little steps that you take consistently over time that move you in the direction that you want to go. And many people look for that big quantum leap. Okay. They want to go, if I use this as an example, right? They want to go, I'm going to launch this radio station on Monday. And I'm going to have thousands of listeners by Tuesday, right? Or the following week. Life is not like that. There's efforts and there's connections in there to develop it, to bring it on. There'll be people that will listen and think that you've lost your mind. Why have you brought a radio station together about well-being and personal development? Well, okay, we value your opinion. It's not for you. Okay. But then there's others that go and love it, right? But it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen by you just sitting there and thinking we're going to have thousands of listeners in a couple of times and in a couple of days. And there's I was talking to a friend of mine once about he was talking about the law of attraction. Okay. And I bumped into him in a coffee shop, and at the moment he didn't have a job. He was struggling to get a job. And I said, how's things going? He went, Steve, I've put it out there. He said, about the law of attraction. You put it out there and it happens. And I went, it don't happen by you sat on your backside watching daytime television. I said, there's a big clue in the last 6 letters of the law of attraction. He went, what's that? I said, the spell action. So you have to do something, right? The universe will give, coming back to what you said earlier, the universe gave me the opportunity when that thing came from the American radio station. I could have sat there, ignored it, and watched. I'm not a soap fan, by the way, Hayden, but I could have watched a soap because EastEnders is on tonight. I ain't got time to email this and just let it go. No. Some action was taken. Where that action took both of us through that journey, when we set off, we didn't know, did we? But we took something. We didn't just sit there and go. And the universe and the things, they'll slap you about the face 2 or 3 times. And if you don't take it, they'll leave you.
Exactly. Yeah. One thing, we've talked a lot in terms of like trials, tribulations, and obviously having high moments and low moments. So for you, well, hopefully you'll have some pearls of wisdom here, Steve. So well-being and happiness. For yourself personally, do you practice happiness? Like, to me, happiness in my mind, with a lot of content I consume as well, happiness is a skill in itself. To be happy and content there are people that just are born happier than others and those that are unhappier. But for you, do you, I guess, practice happiness, or what is it for you that helps you stay rounded, that helps you, especially as you're talking about in some of these challenges, is you've managed to stay very positive and be like, right, I've faced the challenge here, there's a lesson to be taken, so I'm going to take that lesson, I'm going to move on and make sure I do better next time, rather than being defeated by it. So what is it within your day, your week, within your life that you've really found, if anything, has helped you keep that momentum, keep that positivity, and keep happiness as part of your life?
Do you know, one of the biggest things that comes to mind when you talk about that is I read a book many years ago now, and it defined happiness and pleasure. Okay. And many people confuse pleasure with happiness. So they'll buy something new, or they'll enjoy a nice meal, and right. But then if you said to them, can you eat that meal again? Well, they can't because they're full, right? And it gave a definition of happiness, that happiness is living a rich and meaningful life. And if you live a rich and meaningful life, you will experience every emotion. You'll experience sadness, anxiety, fear. They're all emotions. And for me, the way I just view that is, from a happiness perspective, these things are going to happen. So don't fight them. Right? They're going to happen. I'm going to feel anxious. I'm going to feel fearful, at times. Okay. But don't dwell on it. It's part of life. And just let it go. Right. And that's how I just sort of get through my days and things. Yeah. I work up sometimes, I can be talking to a group of people and I could feel anxious before I'm doing it. Just accept it. Just accept that feeling. It's natural. Okay. I used to play football when I was a young lad, and before I used to go out and within the dressing room, before I went out in the tunnel, I tell you what, I was nervous as hell, right? Hoping that I make that first pass of the game and I make a good pass. Okay. But as soon as I got on that pitch, all those fears went, because you were so involved in the game. So don't let those fears hold you back. Okay. That was a natural fear to have, and I think many members of that team that I played with would have some kind of level of fear or anxiety before they go out.
I completely agree with you there. And it's something like,
I can translate to myself and resonate well with in just this podcast, inviting guests on, having a bit of imposter syndrome, a bit of nerves, where you think like, who am I to like have a podcast? I've never trained in this. I don't really know much about what I'm doing. And like before every, I think, hopefully a lot of people will feel this, but like before every recording or every show or every conversation, I do get sometimes I'll be like, oh, why have I agreed to this? This is so nerving. What is it? But then afterwards, I'm like, oh, it's such an incredible conversation. I learned so much. I took so much and I've made a great connection. And so it is just overcoming that. And as you said with happiness, about being accepting of all these different emotions that come. It was a guy named Mo Gawdat, used to be the chief of Google X. In his podcast, he was having a conversation with someone and trying to sort of get to the point of happiness. And he made extrapolated from the information, a great idea of the key to a happy life is to have a really sort of shit start. If you have a lot of bad memories that you have built a foundation on, is that as you start to experience more of life, you start to appreciate things so much more. And if you have had bad experiences, good experiences can feel so much better as a result of it, because you've experienced the bad. But also, as you said, this idea is called hedonistic adaptation, where you said about like you go for that meal and you have that meal again and it's never as good. You buy that fast car and suddenly, this going back to Mo Gawdat, he said about he bought his dream car, and after a few weeks kind of wasn't fazed by it. He sat in this Ferrari or whatever it was and he's like, wow, this is amazing. But then come week 2, week 3, he's like, can't even remember what color it is. And he was trying to work out what it was that was making him miserable. And he thought maybe it's the color. So he bought another one. And he said it wasn't until he had bought 16 cars that he realized it's nothing to do with the car. It's all to do with my mind.
Correct.
I can't buy the right car to make me happy. That doesn't exist. I need to find happiness within. He'd always been happy, but it's just his relationship with this car. As soon as he sort of let go of that and let go of the fact that this material item would have some sort of connection to his happiness, as soon as he let go of that, he felt a lot greater and a lot better around that vehicle. And now it's just a vehicle. He sits in it, he forgets what color it is, and he's just driving it. Sometimes he's not even sure what car he's driving. It's just, oh yeah, I'm in the one that gets me from A to B.
Yeah, and they're pretty, coming back to what you're saying there, though, appreciating, you from the times when things haven't gone well and you've been sad or whatever, and then you appreciate the things that you've got, and that's whole phrase as well, live in the moment as well. Always, I remember reading a bit by Ben Fogel, and he said, always remember to look up, because many people are so busy with their eyes down on the phone, they don't look up and enjoy what's around them. So, look up and it's true, appreciate what you've got, appreciate the here and now. Okay. You have to experience the challenges and the things that have come your way and beat you up, because without experiencing them, how can you appreciate the good times? You can't.
Exactly.
You can't do it. It's just not possible, And there's, I love the quote from Wayne Dyer as well, change your thoughts, change your actions, change your life. And all what goes on in here.
Exactly. Well, so on the context of where you are now and like where you've achieved, is there any, I'm trying to think, if someone's at the start of the journey, whether it's in a form of communication, a form of content, whether it's podcast, radio, or as a business, what things can you, I don't know if I should put a number on it, but what 3 things would you take from your experience that you wish someone had told you or wish you knew when you started?
No, I think for me, it's one, be clear about what you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Have a strong vision. Okay. Be prepared to take what it takes to make that happen. Okay. And don't give up when the challenges come your way. If you really, really want to do it, and it is your passion, right, and it's your desire, enjoy the moment, have fun with it. The challenges will come, but if your reason's strong enough, you'll find a way through it. That's what I would say.
Amazing. There's some nice profound points there to learn on. So if you are starting out, there's your keys to take away. And it's definitely something I can relate to. And I'm trying to think if I would have anything different to say, but I think as well, maybe just anticipating how difficult things will be. So like even when things do get difficult, I think, well, if you're starting in something new, so like I'm relating to more business than podcasting or content creating, but like for me, starting in business and then now years later, I think one key thing is just not to underestimate how difficult it will be, and it can be, and realize that even when it is difficult, it may seem difficult, but months, years later down the line, you'll look back and be like, it was a breeze. That's a normal Monday morning. And being able to sort of accept that, because depending what your experience. So when I started in business, I hadn't really been employed much. I'd only done a bit. I'd sort of worked part-time up to that point. So I'd never really had much of a struggle to go through in terms of work. So then suddenly business was the first time I experienced any kind of massive work-life challenge. And so I think there is just anticipating that it can be incredibly difficult, and don't be put off by that. Don't be like put down by the fact that things are really challenging.
Can I leave you with one story just to put that into context?
Yeah, I do like a good story.
When I used to run the food business, we were a big supplier to the food service industry here in the UK. Okay. And one of the sales team came into my office one day, burst in a blood vessel. Absolutely looked like he would have a heart attack. I said, what's the matter? I said, let's get a coffee. What's the matter? And he said, we've short delivered lasagna verde to some big pub group. Okay. And I went, right. Okay. So he said, well, are you not annoyed? I went, no, I'm curious of why we've done it. I said, but looking at you, you're going to have a heart attack or burst a blood vessel the way you carry on. So I'm going to ask you this question. Is what we do a proper job? And he went, you what? I went, are we a brain surgeon? Are we a paramedic? Are we saving lives or whatever? No, we produce ready meals for the food service industry here in the UK. We have short delivered somebody today lasagna. That means they'll probably have to have a cottage pie. Okay. It is not life and death. So let's just learn from that. We're curious of why it's happened. We'll find out why it's happened, but it is not life and death, and life will go on. So now just chill out and we'll go and find a solution, because the way that you're carrying on, we're just going to end up, well, you're going to end up in a right state. So, and for me, it's just sitting back sometimes when those things are happening and just reviewing it, keeping it calm, and then finding the answer to it. Whereas so many people jump straight in, something's happened, we'll sort this, I'll sort it, right? I'll give him my 2 penneth and all that kind of thing. Wait a minute. No, there's a reason why this has happened. Let's find out. Let's chill out. Let's find the answer. And then once that, we can move forward, and we probably won't happen again. Something else will happen, Hayden. But that won't.
Yeah. That's a huge point there. As something my my personal coach therapist has always said to me, I've always described myself as obsessive, and she's like, nope, replace obsessive with curious and confident. But as you said with that situation there and those challenges is, well, I'll add another C, but remaining curious, confident, like curious of what's gone wrong, confident you can fix it and find a solution, but also calm, just to remain calm. Because if you do become antagonized and angered by it, you just, as you said, that you just end up suffering yourself and stressing yourself out. And when you try and rationalize and handle a situation, you need to be able to respond, receive the information, receive the issue, and be able to respond and not be agitated about it in order to resolve it. And that's a huge thing. And I think that's something that we can, as people, just get a bit worked up when it comes to different issues and challenges. And it's something that now I try and just, even if something terrible happens, if I get a tax bill that I didn't really want to be that high, or if I get something goes wrong and I lose money, or something I plan falls apart, a podcast recording, whatever it is, if it all just goes wrong, it's just kind of relax. I've always had a bit of this rush and lack of patience, and I'm trying to practice more patience now, where I can just accept that I may not get there the day I want to get there, but I'll get there in the end. I kind of like relate it to learning to drive a lot. When I was learning to drive, it was always every day I woke up, I'm not a qualified driver. I don't have the independence. I can't drive. And it felt like forever. And I was always like, oh, how long? And this matters. Like, how many tests will I have to take before I pass? How many months of driving lessons? How many driving lessons? And yet, as soon as I passed, did not matter. And like now, if years back, thinking of those days, I'm like, I don't know how many lessons I took. I know it was 2 tests. Doesn't really matter. I'm not bothered by it. Like, I've learned to drive. It's cool. I'm there. Like, it doesn't make a difference.
And that's kind of the mentality I try and fix myself with, is just remain calm. Doesn't always work. I'm human.
Yeah, and Aidan, I don't know what you're like, but if I listen to some of the podcasts I did 12 years ago, I think, oh my God, what was that about?
No, I completely understand where you're coming from there. Steve, one thing I always like to ask, and one is always my final question, is what is something within the world today that exists that you hope in the future will be eradicated? I love this question. Sorry? Hate. Okay.
Yeah, I just wish we could just recognize that we have differences, but we all are human beings. And ultimately, underneath all that, we just want to be happy. We want to look after our kids. We want children to be happy. We want to grow up in a safe environment. We all want the same. So just recognize the differences, Hayden.
I like that. That's a good answer. And I think even just by fixing that, you can fix a lot of other problems. And something I've really become aware with more later in the last year is often, even when you are faced with, I suppose, hate as an action, or someone that has a lot of disdain, hatred, or anger towards yourself or whatever, oftentimes, like, you hear it, I suppose it sounds like a fairy tale of like people are only projecting their own insecurities onto you. But then I've really sort of resonated with it so much better. And bizarrely as anything, I've learned this more from watching. I've been watching Orange Is the New Black as a TV series. For some reason, it's taught me really just these fictional stories of women in prison, but just seeing how you get the insider story of what's going on inside their head and their upbringing, how they ended up in prison. But then you get the in the moment situation where they're angry and they're taking their frustrations out on someone, and you know what they're saying to the person. There's the fight scene where they're telling them how they're wrong and they're the one on top or whatever, but then it cuts to their backstory of how insecure they are and how unconfident they are, and that's how they handle it. But for some reason, just watching that has kind of made me realize, and there's so much, and if you can just be empathetic with people and have this curiosity, this confidence, and this calmness with people, oftentimes it will help resolve a lot of situations, and you can kind of ameliorate the situation, help dissolve that hatred and that anger. Yeah, that's a wonderful answer, Steve. Thank you.
Thank you.
But yeah, thank you so much for coming on. It's been an incredible conversation. It feels like it's been 5 minutes, but it's been like the best bit of an hour, which is just mind blowing. Yes. But it's been a lot covered, and thank you so much for sharing your stories. I do enjoy a good anecdote. It does make for a good experience. So thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.
And if you could just plug yourself, like where can we listen to the radio? I've been listening to a couple of episodes of the podcast when I'm out and about, and I've been enjoying it. So if we don't know, where can we find those? You can find us online at all the W's, as they say, and it's YOWAHradio.co.uk, and YOWAH is spelled YOWAH radio.co.uk. Online 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Perfect. Thank you so much, Steve. It's a pleasure. Thank you. So there we go. I hope you've enjoyed that. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end. And of course, if you could please like the video, subscribe to the channel, that would be absolutely amazing. It means the world, and it will help get the conversation out. And of course, share it on social media, review it, comment, all those things to help share the conversation. It's really is rewarding to have this podcast, and I get to have some wonderful conversations, and I really enjoy the fact that I get to share them with you. So do make sure to share it with others. Cool. I'll see you next week, but do make sure to check out the channel in the meantime, because you'll get Elon's tweets, and the end of this month, potentially, I'll be getting my Model 3, so I can start making videos there on what it's like to actually own a Model 3, the experience, the good, the bad, being completely open and honest about it. So I look forward to that. Until next week, I'll see you then.